Lwazi is still not audible, Chairperson.
Chair.
I have no sound on my side. I don't know if it's just me.
Me too.
Good morning. I've asked Lwazi to come to my office. I don't know how long it will take, but it's not far. Probably in 2 minutes he will be here. He's struggling with the network.
Thank you so much.
Recording stopped.
Morning, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Recording in progress.
Yes, good morning.
Yes, I'm using the CFO's, Mr. Stole's laptop. Apologies for that. Right. Right, so I'll be presenting quarter one as requested by the members of the committee. So what we'll have on the screen is basically our color coding. We've got 4 color codings. Green, which basically represents performance targets achieved and quantified 90% above when we do the calculations. Yellow is target partially achieved, quantified between 50 and 89%. And then there are 2 levels of targets not achieved at 11 to 49, and also targets not achieved at 0 to 10%. That's our lowest level of poor performance. Now you'll also see that we've got a gray color, which then represents it's not a quarter target in terms of the APP, but we are able to then present to the members of the committee a progress thus far in relation to the activities leading towards the attainment of that target in that very specific quarter. For the next slide. Oh, sorry, Chair. Just 1 second. I actually put the slide from my laptop and then I left the office. I'm just gonna ask someone to remove it from my PC at the office. Just 1 minute. Okay, sorry, Nola, you please remove me completely from the scene, and then we'll use the CFO to upload using his system. If it can be removed completely from the meeting, I think that would be easier. And thank you. My apologies, Chair and honorable members, for that. Right, I was now on the color coding I've just explained. Is it visible on the screen?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Right, so in terms of performance, already, although we had reported on Q, but I'll just take you to the small target tables here. We had a total of 29 targets in Q1, which when represented about 52% in the achievement in Q1 in terms of the targets that have been achieved. Now, this slide basically shows the targets that have been achieved for Q2, but comparatively, Q1 we're sitting at 52, and then this represents Q1. And then the breakdown of the targets of the information per program. I'll only stick to Q1 information, which is represented in the 1, 2, 3, fourth column. With the first 4 columns of the presentation, then the rest is basically represent Q2. But when it comes to the reasons for deviation and corrective measures, I'll also highlight the more or less similar challenges that we faced over the period. Now, for program 1, we've got indicators that talks basically to ethics, fraud, and perception. In Q1, it was not a Q1 target. However, what we had achieved in Q1 was basically the development of the questionnaire in various categories that have been identified. We're using various categories that also touch on ethics matters as well as fraud perception matters in the organization. And also with various stakeholders that have been categorized, 1, internal into the department, the 2, which is basically the service providers, and 3 is also to look at the perception again in terms of fraud and corruption in relation to the client department. So we had already formulated the survey questions, which we're busy formulating the survey questions in Q1. The compliance rate, we had a total of 20 that have been identified as the key compliance rate identified in the department. And all of them were reported in Q1. And when you sum the average of the compliance is sitting at 93%. There are some cases where you find us, particularly when you're looking at cases, labor cases, there are some cases that have gone beyond the required time frame owing to a number of changes, be it the change in the formulation of the panel or be it a change in the those that appear appear before the to represent themselves in the case, or cases that have actually been postponed. So those are some of the things that when we measure into the compliance in relation to the time frame, they would have actually overlapped. Those are some of the reasons. And then performance-wise, as I rated 29 targets, we're sitting at 52% in Q1. So we do experience challenges with other performance in relation to other programs, where you find that there's still some internal and also systemic issues that also point to weaknesses in the controls. And you look at the value chain, the glitches within that also has implications in relation to performance overall. But beyond that, there are also areas where you will have capacity-related matters, where it's a balance between those that are actually operating on a contract basis, and then at the time of reporting would have actually exited the organization, and that would have affected the overall performance in those areas. So that's basically accounts for the level of performance overall in the organization. Then financial performance is about the expenditure, which was sitting at 20% in Q1, and also by treasury, 25% interval on its expenditure trajectory. We're sitting at about 20% in Q1. And again, we've had a number of issues relating to filling of positions that have been identified, that the whole process, if then the positions are not filled within a particular space of time or within a period, it also affects that compensation of employment, which overall will bring down the overall financial level of performance. Then you have from corporate services, the HR, which is basically our vacancy rate. Now we use this as a yardstick to measure the rate at which we then fill positions, as well as ensuring that we have adequate capacity in the organization. We're sitting at 11% against the target of 11%. And basically this also resonates with our annual target of 11%. So we're basically trying to maintain that over a period of time with an intention overall when you stabilize and all processes in place, also to look at a very lower percentage rate going forward. Then that vacancy rate is also disaggregated in terms of the designated groups, particularly focusing on women in SMS level, which is basically targeting at 40% annually, as we maintain it across all quarters, because it's an institution-wide target, and also people with disabilities at a level of 2%. As of Q1, we were sitting at 40.11 in relation to women in SMS. And then we're sitting at 1.1 in relation to people with disabilities. One of the challenges with people with disabilities, the nature and the nature of the department, with regards to the technical aspect of it, we seem to be facing challenges in ensuring that we go beyond that people with disabilities category when it comes to employment. Then in terms of efficiency in the operations of the organization, through our ICT, we've got the automation and the business process solutions for digitizations that have been earmarked over the 5-year period, which are broken down on the project level, which basically means that for the financial year in question, we're about 35% of the total sum of the modules that would then be earmarked for the entire 5-year period. And then although it's not a Q1 target, but we are happy to report to the parliamentary committee, portfolio committee, that we have an e-leave that has already been put in place, developed, and has been trained in the department, and is also been piloted in the department and being rolled out, so that at least we also move away or minimize human errors through emanating from the manual systems and paperwork. So this is also moving into the automation of the system. So we also have the fleet management design that has also been put into place that improves the database and applications of those systems in terms of automating those those processes. And then in terms of digitization, quite a number of issues that we raised. I think when we were presenting also the annual report, we also raised concerns around the ERP solution which also has resulted in a number of consultation with National Treasury and also to formulate a business case that will assist in the compilation and also the driving of this ERP and enterprise resource planning. So what we've done, although it's not a quota target, we've also compiled and consulted on Akipa's functionality to and also produced a report that will then also point to areas that we need to improve on the modules that exist on the system and improve those. So there are also controls that are in place, line functions being the user department, the users of the system, and also ICT in identifying the architectural components that will support that. So there's quite a significant consultation process that then assists in driving that. And program 2 of the department, which is intergovernmental coordination, is broken into two branches. One is the intergovernmental relations, which then drives the development and facilitation and implementation of the sector plan. Now, sector plan, that basically means that you've got the national department sector plan, where national department plays a role in its function, and then you also have the provincial departments that also come on board in the development of the common understanding and common goals and indicators that will drive the sector. And in this context, it's more in the context of infrastructure, where we are looking at how then do we holistically as a government roll out infrastructure, and this then becomes part of the sector plan working together with the provinces. So in quarter 1, it was not a quarter 2 because it's a consultation process with the provinces. So, and also we had developed a matrix where we also capture resolutions that come from the MINMEC, which is your ministerial and MEC's meeting, as well as the technical MINMEC, which is basically administered by or chaired by the accounting office of the department together with the HODs of the provincial departments. So we capture these. It was part of a process, and then the support structures will be the work streams, which then range from governance as well as operations, which include the infrastructure as well as construction of projects, who are also part of this to support these governance structures. So that's what basically happened in the quarter 1. That's the development of a sector, which then was developed in quarter 2. Then the second branch under this is your professional services with a target of 1,000 annually, although it's also not a quarter target, but they do develop reports that basically consolidate the inputs from internships, how many internships, provincial spread, and number of, and in various categories. You also have your professional candidacy and also bursaries. So they also draw information from that, working together with the councils of the department, which basically form part of the entities of the department. And then DPWI, we, I think, Chairperson and honorable members, you will recall that we have moved slightly in terms of the report, in terms of the EPWP, by looking at the reports that are generated on the EPWP reporting system. Now, this EPWP reporting system, this is a coordination function of the EPWP. Although the idea is not to report on the report or just to produce a report, we also go into the detail of the report to then reflect what then are the work opportunities that are created by sector. We also look at the work opportunities that are created in terms of the quotas that have been allocated to the national, the quotas that have been also provided for the provinces. So that's the report will contain all of that. In that. So the next slides will then demonstrate the quantum of the work opportunities that have been created in quarter 1. So at the top there, we're saying, although we think that basically EPWP is on track to achieve its 5-year target of 5 million work opportunities as demonstrated in the medium-term strategic framework. And then in quarter 1, we are sitting at a total of 240,167 work opportunities that we actually been registered into the EPWP reporting system out of a target of 1 million work opportunities, which translates into 23.5% in terms of progress in regards to that to work opportunities. Then also in terms of the breakdown, we also break that value by sector with 5 sectors: environmental and culture, infrastructure, community work programs, non-profit, as well as social. and the target is 1,023,569. And then as the end of quarter one, we are basically sitting at 240,167 work opportunities created in terms of that sector. And that breakdown also comes at the provincial level when you look at the quotas for the provinces and the targets that are actually given for the provinces. From Eastern Cape all the way down, with a total of 595,613 work opportunities targeted for the first quarter, and we're sitting at 224,163 that have been actually reported on the system by the provinces. Now, the difference between honourable members and chair, the difference between the 240 that you see here at the top and the 224 represent for what has been created by the Department of Public Works through the EPWP program. So if you add the difference to this 224, it gives you that 240. The reason why it's not showing here is because we basically are breaking it down per province, and then the balance becomes the national, but it all comes back to 240, which overall quarter one sitting at 23.5%. Now, program 4 is the legislative arm in dealing with this, basically working together with the Infrastructure South Africa coming on board. We do not have a quarter one target on the Public Works bill, but then the work that transpired during that period was basically supporting and providing the portfolio committee on the expropriation, particularly on the public hearings. So basically what we do is that once it has been tabled, or once it has been provided to Parliament, and Parliament is now running the process. As a department, we then provide that technical expertise and support throughout this process until it gets to the point of being gazetted, as we discuss these bills. Then we've got the amendments to the NTTC IDB, which was gazetted in the first quarter, that was developed. The idea is to gazette, and it has already been developed, and then going forward will be consultation towards finalizing that, the process of submitting to minister. And then the Infrastructure Development Act, which was also at the end of the year, the intention is to gazette, but in quarter one is basically to draft those regulations and submit them to the PICC Council for consideration. This was actually done, and it was gazetted in the first quarter. The Infrastructure Development Act regulations were submitted to the PICC, and then the regulations were gazetted for noting. This was actually achieved in quarter one. So going forward, then it's further consultations after gazetting. And then we are also looking at the Infrastructure Development Act amendments, which would then be submitted to cabinet. This is basically an act where we are focusing largely on the establishment, the portion of establishing ISA as an entity. So this then speaks to basically that part. And then the quarter one target was to draft those amendment bills and just to develop those just to draft infrastructure amendment bill, and which has already been done towards then seeing that throughout seeing that at the end of the financial year, to have that component of or that portion of the act, to see the establishment of ISA as an entity, so that the continuous engagements will still continue after that, engaging on the consultant or on the stakeholder inputs towards the final product. Then also we have a number of SIPs. These are strategic integrated projects that we also reported under ISA, Infrastructure South Africa. Now they are consolidated into a report because there's about 52 of them, and there are some that were gazetted, 62 that were gazetted, and over and above that there will be activities that then take place with regards to that. So they've consolidated all those reports, and then the 4 basically annually. And then in each quarter, they'll be demonstrating, they'll be presenting a report that then demonstrates the contents and also the progress in relation to those SIPs. So there's a report that has also been generated to look at those strategic integrated projects. And then we've got the National Infrastructure Plan 2050 Phase 2, which speaks mainly on the social and distributed infrastructure, and the intention is to submit to cabinet by the end of the financial year. Although it's not a Q1 target again, but we've already started on the draft of the NIP 2050, and that is also part of the consultation that we, throughout this process, will be moving towards the intention to submit to minister, who will then submit that to cabinet. Our prestige portfolio, program 5, basically has 3 indicators. One is to support state events with movable structures, and also support the provision of movable assets within a specific day. So this is more of an efficiency indicator to actually look at the turnaround times on the quality of support that we provide when it comes to structures or infrastructures, as well as provision of condition assessment. Movable assets emanating from a condition assessment, and then we respond ideally to that. We have achieved one event was achieved in Q1, and then we also have other events in Q2 that were achieved. Largely, they focus on either state visits as well as presidential or infrastructure. So this also reflects to a cabinet that was held that we are reporting in terms of Q1. And then we provided those movable assets within the time frame of 60 working days, 2 of 2 that we received, and then we responded to that positively, leaving us with 100% achievement. And then in terms of the assessing from the condition assessment register of the movable, we then provide, at least we say from the portfolio, we should be able to provide 20%, which is broken down quarterly to achieve the 80% annually. So each quarter is a 20%. So we are on par in achieving that 20% in Q1. Now for PMTE, we also have an administrative, which is also a financial performance level, which is also in Q1, the target of 27% to have actually, in terms of expenditure, we're sitting at 21%. Which basically also similar challenges in terms of compensation and funded position, but more so under PMTE was also the underspending some of the capital assets that resulted in the delays in that expenditure, which then brought it down against the 27 that we earmarked for that trajectory to about 21%. In Q1. And then the real estate, which is our investment component of the provision of accommodation to client departments. There are 2 things. One is that we also support the government precinct. This is where we are supporting the smart cities through government precinct by identifying and developing and assisting in the development of plans that then will support this in the smart cities and integrated approach. It's not a Q1 target, but as of end of Q1, we had developed a proposal for Polokwane government precinct, and it was in a draft form that will then, moving forward, will be then processed further to then support the smart cities principle through that government precinct. We also have a mandate where we consolidate the needs of the client departments through our user asset management plans. We then consolidate them into a CM, which is a custodian asset that then again according to Giyama, we then have to then provide that to National Treasury. So it's a mandatory aspect which then in Q2 must be presented to National Treasury. Although in Q1 it was not a Q1 target, but progress-wise is where now we're looking at the various chapters that come from the user departments and their needs and consolidating them so that they form part of the CM that then gets submitted to National Treasury in Q2. Then construction project management, quite a number of indicators we have, which basically ranges from the design solutions up to 2 efficiency indicators, one within time agreed and the second one within the budget. And then overall, we look at the quantum of projects that have been completed, and we're also looking at the handover of those projects in construction. Now, in terms of designs, we were targeting 23 in Q1 out of which is a portion of the 85 for the annual, but we achieved about 10%. We're experiencing quite a number of cancellations and also having to re-look at the specifications and drafting of those specifications when it comes to design solutions. That also then affects the entire value chain, resulting in the delays and also affecting the achievement and attainment of those targets that we've set for ourselves. Now, in terms of projects agreed within agreed period, agreed construction time, we had 13 earmarked for quarter one against which is a portion of 75 annually. We were sitting at 6, which translates to 46%. Again, is also delays in completion. We are experiencing a number of performance-related matters by contractors failing to complete those projects on time. We're also picking up issues where there's non-compliance to SARS, your South African Revenue Services, as well as also some of the contractors. I think post-COVID, the issues of pay flows and also reorganization in the contractors, which then affects most of the cash flows. As well as continuing to continue with the project to be completed within the agreed period of time. That also is similar to same with the infrastructure within a budget. We had a target of 19, where we only have 9 projects that are completed within budget, translating to 47%. Again, similar challenges of cancellation of projects and poor performance contractors. I think we are basically noting this as a performance risk. In terms of contractors, we're also looking at cost risk in terms of the budget spend, and that has a ripple effect in terms of the overall budget when it comes to the completed infrastructure projects. And then the handover sites, which also which we had targeted 23 in quarter one, and we had only achieved 7. Again, this also is a very chain process, where we experience quite a number of delays in the awarding of the projects and also the evaluation of the bids. I think also the whole procurement system in terms of the committees concluding on these processes, the longer it takes for the committees to conclude on these processes, the longer the starting time to actually hand over these sites will also be affected, and then eventually affect the achievement of these targets as well. And then overall, when we look at the total number of projects, we're targeting 125 for the financial year, 20 in quarter one. We achieved 10 in quarter two. We only completed 10 in quarter two. This also resonates with the same reasons that we spoke about in terms of the agreed period time, as well as within budget, which basically talks largely to poor performing contractors and also disruption. But I think the other major issue, which is of concern, is also this issue of the construction mafias on site taking over some of the projects, which also affect the delivery of construction projects. Now, the real estate management services, which is the leasing portfolio, right? We also looking at also a reduction in the lease portfolio in terms of the security cluster. It's not a quarter one target. We are looking at 3 private leases that will be reduced for the financial year over the year. And then also not a quarter target, but we are reporting that in the first quarter, there was 1 private lease that was actually concluded. And that also contributes to the one of the 3 that have been earmarked for the financial year. That translates to about 33% already in quarter one in terms of the reduction of those leases within the security cluster. And of those leases, we also need to look at realizing the savings from the private leases. We are targeting 100 million savings to be realized from these private leases with again, also the reason sometimes we don't have quarter one targets on these ones is that there's quite a number of due diligence that then takes place in the assessment of these lease agreements to actually determine the extent to which we save on those leases. And then it becomes difficult to then target upfront in quarter one and quarter two. But we're able to say in the process of that due diligence, especially when then the work has actually been done or there's materialized, we'll be able then to report on the savings realized. Hence, you find 42 million that was realized in quarter one through the process of due diligence. This also looked at those leases that then also come from the previous financial years that we also then assessed to then address the issue of or to then look at the savings that have been realized. And then we're also looking at some of these leases. We also look at in terms of the letting out of those state-owned properties. We look at what revenue do we generate from there. We're looking at the portfolio that we've identified for the financial year. We're looking at an 8% increase that then emanates from the baseline of the previous financial year to say previous financial year, this is the amount that we then generated. But then looking at the portfolio going forward, we're looking at 8% on this one. So in quarter one, we achieved about 18.3% revenue generated, and apologies for that complicated formula, but it comes to about 18.3% of those. Now, if we look at the target, basically, the one represents the leases that we look, because we look at from those leases that we then we say that if we conclude a lease, then it will give us a certain percentage of revenue that we generate. So we then actually concluded those, that one list that was concluded actually generated about 18.3%. Then when we look at the unutilized vacant state-owned properties let out, we earmarked 100 for the financial year, targeting 5 in the quarter one. We actually achieved 6 in quarter one, so we were over the target in quarter one. And I think this one going forward, we will actually see an improvement in terms of the numbers, although there will be some issues relating to internal processes in terms of the circular 135 that then also needs to look at how we then improve on our processes of using vacant land. Continuing on that one, we're also looking at some of the properties that we own. How do we then use them, repurpose them for GPV purposes in support of the National Strategic Plan on GPVF, particularly with those 6 pillars, particularly focusing on the pillar that then focuses on women empowerment as well as protection of women, and also. So we then work together with various departments, particularly Department of Social Development, and well as SAPS, to identify some of these properties that we then let out, or properties that can be utilized for GPV. Not a quota target, but one of the issues is that we did not achieve in the quota because we had engaged with the department, the Gauteng Provincial Department of Infrastructure Development, to actually sign a lease that will then actually use these facilities for GPVF. So there's still an engagement between the two departments in assisting that. And then for awarding, we also focus on the empowerment framework, empowering the landlords. So in that empowerment policy, we then focus on the various categories of landlords, particularly on the migration of the graduation in various components or categories A, B, C, and D. We are targeting that in our portfolio. We're looking at 35% annually, 1% in the first quarter, because we are also looking at the start of the financial year, or coming back from the previous financial year, to looking at how then do we best look at the leases that we conclude, and then how and what in what category of empowerment are they, and then we actually achieved a total of 0.03. We are very weak on that in terms of the empowerment policy. But we're looking at, as the processes unfold and concluding on those lease agreements and the awarding of those leases, we are looking at projecting a positive outlook in regard to those, the empowerment of those landlords. And then in terms of private leases signed with maintenance, I think this one is the regulatory aspect in the department to say no lease agreement will be entered into without an improvement. This also touches on the issues of the client dissatisfaction from some of these properties where they find that the properties are not. So we are now embedding that into the policies to ensure that every lease that we conclude has a maintenance aspect of it, to try and also support and also provide proper services to our client departments. And I've spoken about it, level BEE, which is similar to that of empowerment. We also basically, our portfolio is largely black owned or triple BEE, so it's also 50% higher than the 10% that we had that we had earmarked for the quarter. The other issue that is very important in support of the land reform programs, working together with human settlements, rural development, is also how much land we release for socio-economic imperatives or initiatives and development. So we had earmarked about 161,913 hectares for the financial year. Not a quarter one target, but we are reporting that at least the due diligence of engaging with the human settlements as well as some of the approvals by National Treasury, we are sitting at about 1.5 million hectares that have actually been in quarter one that have been released to support those initiatives. The program, the second last program, which is the Real Estate Information Services, we basically provide support here to provinces where we're looking at assessing the asset register, movable asset register for compliance. In Q1, we targeted 2 provinces, which we have completed, which was Free State and Mpumalanga, in assessing their compliance. And more so is also about verifying those assets in terms of their existence. And we're targeting 23,860 for the financial year at 5,965 for Q1, which we are sitting at 89% in Q1, which is about 5,347 that have been validated for existence in terms of this coverage. And then the last program, which is your facility management, focusing basically on the assessment, conditional assessment, and ensuring that we've got sufficient and qualified service providers to provide the necessary support with regards to the components that I will find in various properties, such as your boilers, HVAC, lifts, and gensets and water system. So this is basically speaks to that that support that we have. So when we do condition assessment, we are targeting 220 annual, 25 in Q1, but we only did 16, which translates to 16%. I think the challenge that we are facing, this which we also presented in the annual report, was the issue of the technical expertise that is required when it comes to condition assessment. That is not just a issue of looking at the building, the facilities, but the structural technical expertise that also required to deal with that. So we are on a process to embark on looking at those, sourcing those technical expertise to assist in that. With regards to components, we 50%. We're targeting out of the 440 properties, 50, but we only did about 87, which was also an achievement, about 177%, 174%. And then these are not the quarter targets, although these are back office processes where you're looking at contracts, term contracts that we use to then reduce reactive maintenance, so that there's a continuous maintenance of those properties. They are not quarter targets, but we do have term contracts in the department in place in various departments that then assist in facilitating these processes. So, Chair and honourable members, this is basically in a nutshell that then translates into the 52% in Q1 of the total of 29 targets that we're managing in Q1. And then I think that also then takes me to the end of the non-financial. The next presentation will then be on the financial, which I will then hand over to Mr. Aaron Mas. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Morning, Chair, committee members, Deputy Minister, Acting DG, and colleagues. Chair, I'm going to present DPW. If I can ask the host to allow me to share. Chair, can I please ask the host to allow me to share the presentation?
The rights have been granted.
Thank you. Chairperson, the presentation, it will be for the first quarter. What we have updated here, because the presentation was about the second quarter, but when you go to the next slide, which was the graph for the spending trend, it was for the first and the second quarter. So what I've updated now is to include the numbers for the first quarter, so that it is clear when I indicate the figures, then you can be able to see them. I must indicate, Chair, that the presentation also covered the adjustment E&E, which we will not be presenting, maybe just to indicate that during the adjustment, there was a reduction in the budget allocation for the department. and the reduction was around 410 million. But now, because we are limited to the first quarter, I will not be discussing, or I will not be presenting the second quarter, which also includes the AE&E. Chairperson, the budget allocation for the first quarter was 8.5 billion, and as at the end of the first quarter, the expenditure was 1.7 billion, which is equivalent to 20%. In terms of the economic classification, for compensation of employees, the budget was 581 million. The expenditure as at the end of June was 122 million, which is equivalent to 21%. The Chair, Deputy Minister did indicate the reason why there is a variance in terms of the spending projected and the actual expenditure. As you can see, when you move towards the right, we have the column that says the drawings. This is the money that we had drawn, and we are projecting to spend 139 million as at the end of June, but the actual was 121 million, and therefore we had a variance of 17 million. So the reasons for the positive variance is because of the delay in the filling of the positions, as the Deputy Minister indicated that in some instances, some of the appointments were from internal, and as such, as we fill one position, the other one become vacant. Goods and services, the budget was 499 million. The expenditure as at the end of June was 55 million, which is equivalent to 11%. In terms of the drawings, we had drawn 67 million. That means we had a positive balance of 12 million at the end of quarter one. The reason for the underspending under goods and services, which is equivalent to 12 million, it is because of the expenditure that was allocated for the management fee that support the non-state sector, which is a transfer budget. There was a delay in the transferring of the money that was scheduled to be paid for the non-state sector program implemented under the EPWP. And if there was a delay with the transfer, then the goods and services could also not be spent. The second area, it was relating to the communication. The spending under the communication item, it was also low because of the delays in receipt of the invoices from some of the service providers. The last one, it's under the agency support, where there was a delay in the appointment for the service providers that are supporting EPWP in the implementation of the programs. The other economic classification, Chairperson, it is the transfers and subsidies. We have the budget of 7.4 billion, and the expenditure as at the end of June, it's 1.5 billion, which is equivalent to 20%. But when you look at the money that was drawn, we had drawn 1.8 billion, and therefore 286 million was not spent. The money that was not spent, Chairperson, it is the 262 million for the non-state sector, which was scheduled to be transferred in the first quarter. The payment only was only paid in July. Then the reason for the delay in the transfer of 262 million for the non-state sector, it was due to the process that IDT was still engaged in for the recruitment of the NPOs that will be implementing the non-state sector program. The process was still in, as such, EPWP could not transfer money to IDT. And the other one, it's relating to the non-state sector. Under the non-state sector, some of the payments were made to the provinces, but 2 million was withheld due to the non-compliance to the DORA by the provinces. The money was subsequently transferred during the month of July to the provinces. Chairperson, under goods and services, under machinery and equipment, the budget was 20 million. The expenditure as at the end of June, it was 316. the expenditure was equivalent to 2%. Against the drawings, the money that was drawn, it was 6 million, and therefore 5.6 million could not be spent under machinery and equipment. Now, the reason for the low spending under machinery and equipment, the bulk of the budget for machinery and equipment, it is linked to compensation of employees, where if the employees are recruited, then the computers and office furniture will be needed. Where the employees are appointed from internally, then it means the money will not be spent because those employees will continue utilizing the assets that are already allocated. As we move to the second quarter, we start seeing the improvement under machinery and equipment. Chairperson, for DPW, this is the end. As I've indicated, I will not be presenting the adjustment estimate as it is linked to the second quarter. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chair, I'll take over the PMTE. My name is Mandla Stole. Chair, on PMTE, this is a comparison of budget against the cash flow. On the receipts, we projected for the annual year, it's 18.4 billion. I'm not going to talk about revision because it was done after the first quarter, so I'll ignore that. So against that total projected receipts, in the first quarter, we received 2.9 billion. In terms of the percentages, Chair, you forgive us because it was basically meant to deal with the quarter 2, and the comparison also was against the quarter 2 of last year. So our sincere apology for that. Then on the current and transfer expenditure, our budget was 13.2 billion and we spent 3 billion. And then we had a surplus of minus 135 million, which is a deficit. Then on capital payments, which is mainly infrastructure, we had a budget of 5.1 billion and the spending was 560 million. You can proceed. Then this is also the revenue. I will also focus on the original budget and the quarter 1 information. So on receipt per transaction, that one was the overall totals or summary. At transaction level, accommodation charges, which is a state-owned, we projected 5.8 billion as the budget, and the actual receipt was 311 million. And accommodation charges, which is client project, 2.5 billion was the budget, and we only received 419 million. And on accommodation charges, which is rental debtors, our projections was 73 million for the whole year, and we only received 13 million. On private leases, our budget is 5.2 billion, and we only received 951 million. On municipal services, which is management fees, our budget was 255 million, and we only received 33 million. Then the total of that budget was 13.9 billion against actual receipt of 1.7 billion. And augmentation, which is the amount that comes from DPWI as the main vote, the budget is 4.5 billion and we received 1.2 billion. So against the total budget of 18.4 billion in terms of the revenue, we only received 2.3 billion. Can move around. We can move. This is summary of expenditure per economic classification. The same principle, Chair, will apply, where we'll then ignore the third column, which is revision of the budget and the revised budget. So we'll stick to the original budget of the total is 18.4 billion, but it's categorized in 3 categories. The first one is your current payments, where we had 11.5 billion for current payments, and the total expenditure was 2.6 billion. Then to go into details under current expenditure, I'll focus more on areas of concerns, Chair. But let me just go through some of the numbers. On cleaning and gardening, we had a budget of 360 million and we only spent 84 million. Similarly, in terms of percentages, they were meant for the second quarter, even the comparison, it was a comparison of the previous year, second quarter. So I'm not going to detail, I'm not going to go through those ones. Then on leases, we have a budget of 5.4 billion. We spent 1.2 billion. On maintenance, the budget is 1.4 billion and the spending is 473 million for the first quarter. Repair, it's 1.1 billion and we spent 105 million. I must say, Chair, that's where there is also a huge concern because that links to infrastructure spending, where basically we only spend 9% in terms of the percentage. Then on municipal services, the budget was 468 million and we spent 134 million. On compensation of employees, the budget is 2.2 billion. We only spent 502 million. Then on goods and services, the budget is 628 million. The spending was 72 million. So the total for current payments, the budget was 11.5 billion and the spending is 2.7 billion. On transfer payments, which is the second category of our expenditure, for transfer payments, the budget for property rates is 1.7 billion and we spent 414 million. Then the total expenditure between current and transfer payments, the total budget is 13.3 billion and the spending was sitting at 3.1 billion for the first quarter. Then the last category of the expenditure is your infrastructure payments. On refurbishment, Chair, we have a budget of 1.6 billion and the spending is 157 million, which represents 10% of the budget. So it's low. And on DPW capital, the budget is 986 million and the spending was 106 million for the first quarter, which is 11% of the budget. Then machinery and equipment, it's 42 million budget and we spent 2.4 million. On client capital, it's 2.5 billion and we spent 294 million, which is basically 12% spending. So the total budget for infrastructure, including machinery and equipment, it's 5.1 billion and we only spent 560 million. The total budget, as I indicated earlier on, it's 18.4 billion and the spending was 3.6 billion for the first quarter. You can move, Aaron. The summary of budget adjustment, Chair, I'm not going to deal with it because everything there, it happened in the second quarter. If you can move to the next slide. Chair, this slide, Chair, even though it's not for the first quarter, maybe it's important also to deal with the interventions that are put in place, even though in terms of the figures are not for the first quarter, but at least just to make a point in terms of the interventions. We've analyzed projects to say if we were to focus on the top 50 projects, what impact would we make? You can see like there are projects like your PPD, it's one project, 100 million. And in other regions, you have 5 projects. For Cape Town, it's 281 million budget. Devon, 2 projects, 194. So the intervention that has been put in place, the the senior management of the department, as well as our political principals, will be doing surprise visit to any site, so that just to put pressure on all our contractors, because we don't understand why contractors they will bid for work and then they don't perform, because it is in interest of any business person to work and get money, because project is one of the areas that must stimulate the economy of this country, as the Deputy Minister outlined earlier on. I must indicate, Chair, the Deputy Minister has already requested a list of projects for Gqeberha, because she intends to visit the sites as part of the intervention to improve spending on infrastructure. Chair, I think I will end there, because on data, the information that is there, it was for the second quarter. So I'm not going to details on those figures, because they are not relevant for the first quarter. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Loazi, Acting DG and DM, for these inputs in presenting the report of the first quarter. I now invite honorable members for the deliberations on this. I also want to, so that Ms. Martinez knows that Honorable Jobo has requested that she be released at 11, as there is an urgent meeting that she has to attend at 11. According to the list that is in front of me, Honorable Siwisa, you'll be the first one to speak. Honorable Krammare, the second one. Honorable Hicklin, the third one. Honorable Van Skalvik, the fourth one. Honorable Tring, the fifth one. In that order, honorable members, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation that was done. Chair, I don't know whether I have a question or if I'm going to make my dissatisfaction about the report so far. The presenter spoke. I'm going to speak about the leasing of buildings because a few weeks back we saw, we were not even invited to the handing over of these buildings. And me personally, I was with the view that we are handing over buildings that belong to the Department of Public Works. And today we are being told that a lease was signed. So I don't know, maybe they can explain the issue of handing over. What do they mean by handing over? Because I think I can hand over something that belongs to me and hand it over to somebody else. If they can give me clarity on that. My second one would be, they speak about maintenance. They've been speaking about maintenance for as long as we can remember, since we got into the 6th Parliament. But there is no evidence that actually maintenance actually happens. And a simple example that I can put forward is, we went to Telkom Towers. You can clearly see that there's no maintenance that's happening there. So if they constantly speak about maintenance, and then you don't see any evidence, because some of us will go and do oversights, we randomly get into a hospital, not saying who you are, and you see the conditions of these hospitals, you see the conditions of these police stations, you see the conditions in some of these magistrates' courts, you see the conditions in the clinics, the schools, everywhere. But every time we are being told about maintenance. So what is maintenance? Does maintenance speak about ticking off boxes, or actually going down there and see that the maintenance is done? You go to slide 16, they speak about cancellation of why there's deviation. They speak about cancellation of projects based on poor performance of contractors. What are you doing about these contractors that are poor performing? Because they are just going to shift to another province. They speak about interference of business forums. What are you doing? They speak about delays in awarding projects and the procurement process in this whole thing. So it seems as if I always tell people, if you give me a reason, you give me more than 2 reasons, it means that you are trying to justify why certain things are not happening. So we are being given different reasons. We are not even sure why are projects being cancelled or why are projects being delayed. I'll go to EPWP. They say that reported there are job opportunities, and yet there's underspending. So how does job opportunities happen when there's underspending based on transfers were not made to the EPWP social sector, transfers were not made to the EPWP program integrated grant to provinces, transfers was not effected by EPWP non-state sectors. And then you are saying that you are doing job opportunities. Is it job opportunities because of the numbers that are being given? Or is it job opportunities because of actually people are being given the opportunity to be able to get a source of income? So it's very perplexing. And, you know, one sits here and wonders, actually, what's the work of the public works? Because every time we are seeing the people not getting the services that they are supposed to be getting. And because they touched on the issue of projects, and then they said it's for the second quarter, but because it's there, you can't ignore it. I ask myself, from those projects that are being stated there, how many of those projects are actually in rural areas? How many of those projects, because we can't ignore it. It was there on the slide that they presented and they went through it. So we can't ignore it. Maybe we'll deal with it when they come with the second quarter. But I'm sitting and asking myself, actually, how many of those projects are in the rural areas? Because those are the most neglected people in South Africa. Because people are taken that those people are illiterate or they don't know anything, they don't know the procedures, and then they are going to be ignored to be given service deliveries or to be given projects that are going to improve their lives. For now, Chair, I'll listen to the responses or the comments, and then maybe if I'm not satisfied, I'll come in for the second bite. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Siwisa, Honorable Klamare.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'd like to start slide 5, references an 11% vacancy rate. But our researcher did the calculations in terms of the declared number of vacancies versus the allocated positions in the establishment and came up with a 14% vacancy rate. So I'd like to know why there's a variance of 3% between your figures and those of our researcher. Slide 7 speaks to the EPWP reporting system. The Auditor General flagged the accuracy of the reporting as being a big issue in the last financials. So I want to know what quality control mechanisms are in place and whether or not this is just a quantitative KPI or whether there is any quality control associated with it. In other words, are we happy just to get the report? Or are we sure that the report is accurate and verifiable and that the figures that we are looking at are correct for the next Auditor General's report? Slide 16 speaks to the cancellation of contracts. Are we blacklisting contractors who are failing the department? What role are the consultants playing that we pay so much money to in managing this risk? what are the cost implications of a rescue contractor, and are there duplications in terms of payment and work? And I'll give you an example. The Sarah Bartman Centre of Remembrance, there was a contractor on site. They did a whole lot of work. They also got paid for work that they hadn't yet done. When the next contractor was appointed, they were ostensibly told that they had agreed to do the work that was still not done but had already been paid for. And when they raised a variation order on that, they were told that they had agreed to that and it couldn't be paid. And sometimes that runs into hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So a previous contract has been paid for work that actually hasn't been done. So are there duplications of payment as a result of those cancellations? And what are the cost implications thereof? Slide 18 speaks to circular 135. I just want to make sure if that is the letting out circular that we've been waiting 2 years for, so that we can finalize leases at places like the small harbors. The compensation of employees is literally every single presentation we get from the department is that there is under expenditure on compensation of employees. There has to be some strategy in place to address this. ESA, there was an underspend of 3 million rand in terms of filling of vacancies, but I did see in the report that I went through, the slides, that there's an additional 83 million rand paid to ESA in terms of the adjustment. So I'm just curious as to what they're being paid for and whether or not that links into the work that they've done on behalf of the department on the property construction research policy, the property and construction industry policy and research branch, whether or not those two, the regulations and the amendment to the bill, whether or not they're being paid for that work. Because when we had the presentation by ESA, I asked whether or not there were any additional costs to the department, and they said no, it was just the 100 million that had been allocated. So I just want to know whether or not that 83 million is in addition to the 100 million, and also why they still haven't managed to fill vacancies to the extent of 3 million rand. On your slide 49, there's just an error there. At the top of the columns, you've got the 3 zeros. So where you're giving us figures of 2 billion, if you read it with the 3 zeros, then it's 2000, then it's 2 trillion. So those figures are then incorrectly recorded. There's been a delay of 11.8 million rand to the Parliamentary Villages Board. Now, we heard from the Auditor General that there have been no financials forthcoming from that board for the last 5 years or so. How has that delay of their transfer of funds affected their ability to actually meet their requirements in terms of reporting, in terms of functionality, and also what sort of support is the department giving them to assist them to get their affairs in order and to become financially compliant? And then just finally, there's serious capacity challenges in the property and construction industry policy and research branch. So what is happening is that the DPI is now procuring services from legal firms to do the research, review, and drafting of legislation, which should be emanating from the department itself. It's not correct that the financial allocations must then be made to the branch to do work that it's actually subcontracting. So can you please give us the allocated amount for the construction policy and research, but just the allocation outside of the transfers to the PMTE and the entities? So how much is allocated for the actual policy and research? And then what costs were incurred to outside legal researchers and consultants to do the legislative work of this branch? And that's me for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Primary. Honourable Hicklin.
Thank you so much, Chair. My comments are solely on the most vulnerable branch of the DPWI, and that is the EPWP. Yet again, I'm just concentrating on the finances. So much of the underspending in the finances as reported relate to underspending on the non-state sector EPWP, underspend of 286 million here, or 266, or 2 million there, and how many other millions here who have not been transferred between one department and another, or an underspend with the non-state sector, or transfers and subsidies that are not made, and it's not made in June, but it has been made in July. It may not affect those of us who are getting a salary in a salaried job, but the people who are beneficiaries of EPWP, who are not receiving the subsidies because of one or other glitch in incorrectly filled in forms, or non-state sector NGOs who are not trained correctly. This is a constant that becomes made known to us every time we either get financials or get an audited report or get a project projection that is not, that relates to NGOs or non-state sector EPWP administrators who are not trained correctly. The people who are in the EPWP are the people who suffer the most. They are the people who are in the EPWP and need the money the most in order to feed their families. For us to merely throw up our hands in horror and say, so many millions of rand are not transferred, we have to ensure that those NGOs and those non-state sector NGOs and NPOs are trained in order to upload their documentation correctly so that the beneficiaries get paid. That must be a priority. We cannot just throw our hands up in horror and say they didn't meet the criteria and so they weren't paid. Another question I want to just highlight goes back to this Sage Archibus debacle that we have had of so many millions of rands being poured down the drain of the immovable asset register, registration of properties, land, or whatever we are supposed to have channeled and registered in this immovable asset register. So many modules were registered or put onto the Archibus system, and now we're moving to another system. Have we actually worked out the cost of the Archibus system to the Department of Public Works? Has it been an effective use of that money, or has it just been fruitless and wasteful expenditure? I believe it's fruitless and wasteful expenditure because we're now moving to a new software platform because Archibus hasn't done the job that it's supposed to have done. It has not melded with Sage. So we're now moving to a new software platform, and we still don't have an immovable asset register worth the paper that it's written on. We have to do something to address the incredible apparent lack of filling of vacancies in this department. The holes that one can pick in these presentations is remarkable, and it is recurrent. I will leave my comments there. Thank you, Chair. It just seems to be that we are a stuck record in the same groove. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Hicklin. Honorable Van Schalkwyk.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to the Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, the DM and the team, as well as our support staff. Chairperson, I also want to welcome the presentation that has been made, even though the quarterly target that has been met is 52%. It's really a point of concern for me. I'm sharing the same sentiments, Chairperson, as the previous members with regards to this continuous recurring of the under expenditure in terms of the filling of vacancies. And my concern is the same, Chairperson, as previously on the impact that this has on service delivery. Because even though it might be 11% or 14%, it's still a point of concern, because if we look at the actual numbers of vacancies, it's more than 100 chairperson, more than 100 people that could have been employed that hasn't been employed. And that's a point of concern to me. Chairperson, the issue of the transfers of subsidies withheld to the value of 291.4 million rand is a point of concern for me, especially in terms of EPWP at an amount of 4.8 million rand. Grant that has been withheld from the provinces. I want to know, Chairperson, which provinces has been affected by this move and which requirements were not met, and the impact on EPWP target for the financial year this withheld of the transfers have. Then, Chairperson, when we look at the Parliamentary Villages Board, I want to echo the sentiments in terms of, we've heard that through the AG, that since 2014, the Parliamentary Villages Board were not able to be audited. And there's no clear indication, Chairperson, of measures being put in place to try and remedy this situation. But instead, when they said that there's a delay in the transfer of 11.8 million rand, I want to know, what did they do? Did they only withhold and then later on release the funds again? Or what is the practical measures and steps that they've put in place, Chair, to remedy the situation? Because it cannot be ignored, Chairperson. And what is the impact also of if any, of the withheld or the delays in the transfer? Chairperson, there's this concern. We know that there's the expectation of a 25% target that needs to be reached by each program per quarter. And we've seen that only program 4 achieved 27.2%, but all the other programs haven't achieved that 25% during quarter 1. And it's as low as 7.9% example for program 3. And it's a point of concern. What is the department doing in trying to ensure that this thing is really turned around? Then, Chairperson, we know that we are heading we are from COVID, and we are beginning to adapt to normality. But Chairperson, I still believe that the measures that's been put in place during the COVID period, some of them needs to be kept in place in terms of sanitization, in terms of ensuring that, because today we are coming from COVID, but there might be other areas of concern in terms of diseases that's being impacted through poor measures being put in place in terms of hygiene measures. So if we see expenditure of 1,000 Rand in terms of PPEs for employees, is that an accurate amount that I see? And if so, does that mean that the department closed the chapter on COVID and proper hygiene measures being instituted, and other basic protocols are not being considered anymore? I think I'll pause there. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Van Schalkwyk. Honorable Tring.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Chair, just a few questions also from my side. So firstly, thank you for the presentation. With regards to slides 15, 16, and 17 dealing with the construction project management, Chair, it's my assertion that the inability to reach targets is extremely concerning. And if this is not addressed, then it becomes almost acceptable and the norm. Now, two of the reasons given that I can recall for targets not being met with regards to the construction project management programs is one was the involvement of the construction mafia, and the other was the client's implementing agents. What we're finding in certainly some of the other departments is that so we know the construction mafia and how they operate. But with regards to the client implementing agents, what we're finding in some of the other departments is that some of these implementing agents are not properly skilled, financially, administratively, and otherwise. So, but clearly there ought to be a particular system in place before an implementing agent is actually taken on board. And those particular systems, that particular program actually has to be followed before an implementing agent is taken on board. So the question is, what type of systems are in place? Are those systems actually being adhered to? What actually happens if the targets are continually not reached, but budget spent? And I think that in some of the departments, this is also, and I have the privilege of sitting on other committees. So sometimes we see, targets not reached, but budgets actually spent, and one begins to wonder how is that possible? But I can see how that's going to be possible with the reasons given with regards to the construction mafia and the challenge with implementing agents. Is that we have these, and in this particular case, it's also going to be targets not reached and budgets overrun. Slide 19 speaks to so the question just there before I move on. What is the plan to turn this around so that we are not coming back year after year? A challenge with construction mafia, challenge with implementing agents. We need a plan in place so that we're not having a repetition of this quarter after quarter and year after year. Slide 19, with regards to the unutilized vacant state land, state-owned property for GBV purposes. Now, it has a commendable target of 10. It's utilizing of vacant state-owned land for GBV purposes. And for quarter two, there's a target of 1. Okay, we're dealing with quarter one, but quarter two. But even this particular target has not been obtained, and the reason given is that they're waiting for the signed leases from DID. Now the question here is, when was that lease given to DID to be signed? When? What was the date? And how long are you actually waiting? Because clearly, again, Chair, there has to be timelines. You cannot submit a lease to be signed to a particular official, and it sits on the desk for 6 months, 10 months, and there's no follow through. So when were these leases sent to be signed, and how long are you actually waiting? The complaints about under facilities management, there were complaints about the HVAC equipment. Now, when we were at Telkom Towers, one of the complaints was that the ACs were not working properly, and yet when there was the handover, the implementing agent, which I think was the Development Bank of South Africa, as well as the city of Tshwane, the boxes were all ticked. Everything is in place. The property is habitable, and SAPs could actually move in. But there were numerous complaints about the ACs not working properly. Cables, we discovered, were actually stolen from the rooftop at a SAPS building, which is a key SAPS center. Now, if we have other buildings, and one of the under facilities management, one of the areas of concern was the HVACs. This is a health hazard for the employees, state employees, and clearly, Chair, this also is not acceptable. So we need to ensure in terms of facilities management that our buildings do not become health hazards. And then PMTE, the capital budget, and I caught this. Unfortunately, I was having some challenges also with logging in and out, but I caught this also towards the end as well, Chair. But there seems to be a low expenditure on, particularly with the capital projects, with regards to maintenance and infrastructure. And I think across the board, where you have insufficient expenditure with regards to maintenance and infrastructure, it's a recipe for disaster. Somewhere down the line, it's going to catch up. And this is an area, particularly with regards to the capital PMTE, capital projects, this is an area that we have to give careful attention to. And Chair, I think that maintenance and infrastructure ought to be perhaps one of the priorities in terms of capital spend, one of the priorities that we as a committee need to be asking for continued reports on those particular projects, and has proper maintenance and infrastructure development been put in place. And then finally, Chair, I want to just agree with my other colleagues with regards to the Parliamentary Village Board not submitting books alarmingly for some 7 to 8 years. It is completely unacceptable. There has to be consequence management put in place. If not, my view is that this board will continue to see the department as a cash cow. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Trink. Any other hand? If I may come in, though I am covered by many of my colleagues there, it's this issue of the in the Q1, there is an expenditure of 7.5 billion, which is in transfers and subsidies, but it has not been a breakdown has not been done as you previously do so when you are sending us the report. So if you can just maybe explain, or if possible, send us that breakdown as you usually do. But I'm covered mainly on the issue of you indicating that you have underspent because you have not employed people, and it's worse for positions that are budgeted for. So what is the impact of those positions that are not filled on the functionality of the department and also on the service delivery? Thank you. Over to you, Acting DG and your team.
Thank you very much. I will answer and then ask my colleagues to vote that on the comments and the questions raised by Honorable Suisa, that indeed the numbers that we put forth in the report and in the presentation around the beneficiaries of EPWP, indeed those numbers represent real beneficiaries. This is an issue which the chair is also aware that the AG auditors on, and the AG has been raising as a matter that we need proper verification of all of the beneficiaries and accounting for each and every single one of them. I think that over the last 3 financial years, we have made an effort to make a significant improvement in really authenticating beneficiaries and in ensuring that the numbers that we actually give forth are numbers that represent real beneficiaries on the ground, and therefore the work opportunities that have been created. One also needs to look at the issue of that has been raised that we are giving a lot of excuses for why projects in construction are not taking route, and they are actually not coming to fruition, and that it takes significant period to delay. And Honorable Suisa believes that we are making excuses where work has not really been done. Truth be told is that we are presenting this facts and this reasoning as a true representation, Chairperson and members, of what is the reality that we are faced up with. We do accept that we could do a lot better than what we have done till now, but this presents the reality of what we have. She has adjoined us to go beyond this delaying a project, and the business forums are demanding what is undue to them, and to actually indicate what we are doing about that. If I may give the top 3 reasons as to why there are significant delays in this regard, and starting with the first one of the construction mafia. Minister has adjoined us to commence forthwith that all of our construction programs be led by a new phase, and that phase is the phase of social facilitation. And Minister has taken the lessons learned from the Salvocop precinct program, and that we apply those to all of our new construction projects, and that the social facilitation process be rooted as part of the methodology to engage with communities and to ensure that we can mitigate against what the construction mafia and the business forums tend to do in disruption of sites, and that there would also be better facilitation in as far as security and the security agencies of our country, most notably SAPS, for its involvement at the local level where the project is taking place, and that we replicate this methodology and add this new phase to all our construction program. Good news is that we have commenced with the new tenders that have been issued in this regard. They do include the element of social facilitation as a key critical component to the execution of the project, and therefore a matter that contractors responding to our bids needs to provide for and needs to actually demonstrate capacity to be able to undertake such facilitation. The other key of contractors was to admit that some of the contractors we may have appointed in the past and who have really disappointed us and have left projects halfway, and they have not awarded the of work they have performed not being what it's supposed to be, and even worse, where sites have been abandoned. This type of contractors, we have command of where the problematic sites have been, and we shall treasury for purposes of them, considering them from the proven track record that is required of the contractor to demonstrate to us their ability to perform work. We've got to take that part even much more serious than we have previously to avoid what the eventuality of a contractor that is not in line. We are pondering strongly the possibility of imposing higher deposits and changing the JDCC agreement and that is a general, there's no prescript anywhere that prohibits us unsuitable to us, and that have allowed for lengthy non-resolution of dispute processes. We have to that extent considered that we should consider key alternative dispute methodologies that both the contractor at contracting stage and ourselves must agree to, including arbitration, direct arbitration after a dispute with dedicated timelines attached to each and every one of the steps, so that we're able to resolve issues within weeks and not the years that it has taken us to resolve some of the disputes. And according in terms also thresholds of the deposits that the contractors need to pay for us, depending on the nature and type of the contract that they are getting, because there is no incentive for the contractors to do what is right, because the amount of money they are likely to lose is quite meager and small. If we raise this, the downside of it is that we know will attract criticism that says we are trying to stop small players and developing contractors from entering our thing because we are putting barriers to them. But I think at the stage we are we need to look at the state and looking at the interests of the state in this regard, and taking the money that we have and give a disincentive to contractors to leave sites for, they will lose a lot of money, and this will also help when we get a new contractor to take those forfeited deposits and utilize them to kickstart the projects going forward. Now, if I go to the other
I think that we are losing acting DG. I can't hear him now. The line was not clear even before, but now I think we just lost him. Can someone else come in from the department as part of responding to the questions and comments raised by honorable members?
Can I request CFO to
Okay,
to proceed?
okay. Okay, TM.
Thank you very much, DM and Chairperson. I'm not going to cover what the DG has responded on. I'm with also Lwazi. He will come in on the questions that relates to him and Aaron. Chairperson, there was a question on the Sage and Archibus. Chair, on that one, we haven't abandoned Archibus. So we are in a process of getting a service provider so that certain modules that were not completed with a previous contract should be implemented. So there is a process that is ongoing in terms of that area. So it's not correct to say we have stopped Archibus. So we'll be finishing all the modules. If CIO is here, maybe she can add on that. The other area that I thought I must look at from finance point of view, I think Aaron will come in on other finance issues. Then Lwazi will answer other questions. Aaron.
Thank you, CFO. Chair, with regard to the breakdown of the transfers, we will provide the information. It is available. In response to the policy and research unit, where Ms. Samantha was asking how much is allocated for policy excluding the transfers, the budget for policy branch is 23 million. Of the 23 million, 15 million is allocated to compensation of employees, and the 8 million is allocated to goods and services. The other question was in relation to additional funding that is allocated to ISA, as indicated in the presentation. The amount that is allocated, it is for the project preparation. It is not for the internal use of ISA, like for compensation of employees to fill the additional positions, but it is for the project preparations. ISA is working with IDC to implement the project preparations, and that money, which is 100 million, it's allocated for that purpose. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair, and honorable members for the question. I think the one part on the ERP, which CFO is also touched on, I think it's more of it's not buying another software or platform. It's more of looking at some of the outstanding modules that are earmarked into the system. For instance, on Agibus, you've got your infrastructure budgeting, you've got your construction one, and then on the Sage, you are also looking at finalizing the module on the payment aspect of it. So it's mainly those that will be forming part of the modules that are working on to the system. I think we also take note of the effect that when it comes to performance related matters, yes, when you're looking at a 25% interval, you'll see that some of the programs are not doing very well in relation to if we were to use 25% as a yardstick on a quarterly basis, doing very well. I mean, they're not doing very well. And those are the reasons. I think there are questions that have been raised under EPWP that will also look at how also to improve on that one. There are questions from CPM. I think Mr. Batu is also in the meeting to also clarify some of the questions that have been raised. There were questions from facilities management as well, particularly on the maintenance. And I think that will also touch on the quality of maintenance and also the balance between what we are actually maintaining and also the responses from the clients in respect to those maintenance. I think Mr. Lombard is also in the meeting to also assist on that one. On the vacant sites, the vacant buildings, and also the leasing portfolio, there are also colleagues that can also look at those ones as well. I think there's also a question on prestige, particularly on the financial statements that have been outstanding for some time. I think prestige is also in the meeting to also give input into that. Thanks, Chair.
Continue, Batu.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, Honorable DM, Acting DG. I'm not sure if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you, DM.
What,
on the side,
I don't know whether you also like to respond.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. On the side of the construction management branch, the Honorable members have raised questions by the acting DG, but an understanding that with respect to the performance and the budget aspects within the construction branch, we have then done a deep dive into the portfolio itself. We have looked into the projects that are in the planning stages to understand how many of these projects there are. There are about 600 odd projects in these planning and design stages. And these projects have also been delayed due to a number of factors. And some of these factors are as a result of budgets and prioritization by client departments for the projects to then be graduated into construction. Within our portfolio in the planning and design, a number of the DoD specific projects have now been stopped, and we're unable to then graduate those projects into construction. However, they remain as part of our performance as projects that are not moving. We also have looked into the projects that are in the procurement stages, and we've seen the SCM nature and how tedious this process has become, that it even takes us between 8 to even 12 months to procure a contract. And during that process, the buildings deteriorate, and by the time you get a contractor on site, we're already working on a back foot. And we have then put together some interventions that have been endorsed by the EXCO that are now in the implementation to tackle the delays that we are seeing in the planning, design, and procurement, and also in the construction aspects. We have highlighted some of the key delays, just for honorable members to highlight that in most of the questions that were asked, there were concerns raised around the performance of the portfolio itself, around its ability to spend the appropriate budget, and also its ability to meet its particular target. And in our analysis, we've realized that there is the capacity constraint which needs to be augmented. So we then included the 3 implementing agents which were approved by National Treasury earlier this year. The DVSA, IFIN, Public Works, to deliver projects that are within the value chain. We've also enlisted the support of ESA, predominantly in the project preparation.
Looks like we've lost Batu. Or you are muted, Batu.
Thank you, Honorable DM. For some reason, our network in the office is not very good at times. I was then highlighting on the aspect around the heavy reliance on the consultants due to the lack of capacity within our project managers, that we realized that our project managers are not in charge of the projects. As a result, the external consultants then take over the full management functions
that our project managers then have to do. We have embarked in June and July of this year, training on contract and project management aspects with our project managers. We've trained them on the JBCC contract, the GCC contract data. We've also trained them on the WCS, which update the project milestones accurately. This is an ongoing process. We are not then done yet in terms of uplifting the skills levels of our own project managers, but it's an area that we've identified as an area of weakness. On the issue of consultants, where they embark on poor scoping, and as a result, we then have issues of variation orders. We have engaged thoroughly with the Council of Environment, and also on the voluntary associations such as CISA, to then some of the consultants as a department, as an industry, because this challenge is cutting across the national, the provincial, and also municipalities, where consultants are not delivering on the SLAs that they have been appointed on. And yes, what we are then doing is, in terms of those particular contracts, we are then putting the consequence management aspects around that. But we believe we need to improve, as we have not done that quite well in the past, such that if consultants continue to underperform on their contracts, they must be dealt with, and terminations need to then take effect, such as the way we terminate the contractors. Similarly, on the poor performance on the contractors, we have also engaged the CIDB, as we have also identified this as a sector-wide challenge of saying our contractors, they get into projects, and the moment they get in, we start realizing issues of cash flow and the poor performance. And in terms of the contract, the remedy for that is if the contractor is not performing, they get put on mora, and that's what we do. And ultimately, if they don't fix the challenges that we have placed to them, we then terminate. But termination at times, it is not the best solution in the sense that if from the onset, we got a good contractor that was capable of delivering that project, then we'll not have a problem of terminating and the long delays. That is where the CRDB and ourselves are engaging in terms of the register of the contractors that they have, that they have to make sure that they're placing the right contractors at the right level. We can't have a 9 CE or GB contractor that is unable to deliver on a project of that particular grade and showing signs of capacity constraints. It means there is a challenge in this aspect of the grading of the particular contractors. And we have started engaging with them, and we'll soon reach a conclusion around that particular aspect. And honorable members have clearly identified an area of oversight that is important. We have then, since the beginning of quarter one, started doing road shows. We've, as a branch, gone to Johannesburg Regional Office, Pretoria Regional Office, Mthatha Regional Office, Polokwane Regional Office, Kimberley Regional Office. Tomorrow we're in Bloemfontein Regional Office, where we're going through the specific projects which are delaying, that are showing a lack of movement, to understand what is happening in those projects and to give guidance to the project managers on how to overcome specific challenges that they may have in the delivery of these projects. Being specific, Honorable Chairperson, to the questions that were raised, Honorable Siwisa raised questions around the poor performing contractors, the issue of the sites that are being taken over. And our response to this has already been dealt with in terms of the enhancement of capacity through the implementing agents, and also our ongoing engagements with the CIDB, which will seek to get to the bottom of the issue of the poor performing contractors. And with respect to the communities that are taking over our projects, we have then taken off from the pilot that was done on the Savacop project, so that social facilitation becomes part of each particular project. We are in this quest supported by the CIDB Build program, where it requires us to do social facilitation and to have proper structures such as the PSC and the CLO ahead of time, so that the communities are socialized way before the contractor gets there. And then the beneficiation that comes out of the project is then well communicated ahead of time. This is what we're then embarking upon. In my recent visit to Kimberley Regional Office, the regional manager had then started off with a social facilitation campaign on projects that are tender ready, to say all of these projects, before the contractor must then be on site, we should have ticked these key requirements of social facilitation. So since Q1, we have then made some movements around the proper engagements within our communities to try to minimize the key issue of sites that are taken over by business forums and so forth. However, honorable members, there are certain elements of criminality. In one of our projects in the Durban High Court, we have then put in all the different measures to ensure that beneficiation is well understood within the project, but we still have elements of criminality where we are now guarding our construction site with heavy machinery, so that the contractor is able to deliver on the mandate that they are working on. And on that particular project, I believe we're at 33%, and we anticipate to complete the project on November of 2025. And we are still in line with those particular project execution plans, despite of the different challenges. With respect to the projects in rural areas, we have a total of 227 projects that are in construction and that are cutting across different provinces. What we will then do is to also drill down to reflect which of these particular projects are touching on different municipalities. We have the DDM model, which we are working on, but we will then consolidate it to then reflect exactly where are these particular projects, and that information can be submitted to the Honorable Committee. Honorable Graham Murray raised a question around the issue of the cancellation of contracts. And this largely stems off from the performance areas by the not performing. We then need to then apply the different conditions of that particular contract. We put them on mora, and eventually, if they don't improve, they then become a risk to us, and then we certainly terminate. Within this area of termination, the big gap for us is the amount of time it takes between termination and for us to procure a follow-on contractor. We have seen circumstances where it takes 12 months, even up to 18 months between the termination until we get a follow-on contractor. And therefore, to cut this down, we have put together a strategy has been presented to the National Bid Adjudication Committee to approve it to go out to the market. The NBAC has given us some responses which we are working towards, and we anticipate that at least by Q4, we must then advertise this panel of contractors together with a panel of consultants, to shorten the time that it takes on the procurement, to unblock this tedious procurement challenge that we have around the cancellation of the contractors. There was also a question raised around the role of consultants, and I've attempted to touch on that particular point, that the department has a reliance on external service providers to augment the capacity that we have internally. And we've also looked into training our own internal capacity so they're able to match up in terms of skill and ability to the external service providers. But so we are then building in our in-house capacity. These consultants, their role is mainly to design the plans during the design and development. They will take the designs through the sketch plan process, where it's an internal control process where the department then certifies that whatever is being built or planned is in accordance to the procurement instruction by the client department. Then they take the project up until completion. Mainly during construction, they do contract administration on behalf of the employer. And I think within that role of contract administration is to make sure that the contractors that are doing work on our behalf are well managed, the issues of contract management are up to date, and that there are no comebacks around that area. There was also, Honorable Chair, a specific question around the Sarah Batman project. And this project is receiving the highest attention in terms of the ministerial intervention. In the last few days, we've had engagements with National Treasury around this project in terms of its way forward for it to be brought to a logical conclusion. And there were indeed certain hurdles around the project where work was certified by the consultants. And when another contractor came, that work was then realized that certain amounts of it were not done. But it remains the responsibility of this team to make sure that whatever monies that were paid or over or under get recovered. And this project is then undergoing a forensic investigation, which will then detail exactly what had transpired during the implementation phase and who did what and who didn't do what accordingly. But we do have a way forward in terms of our engagements with the National Treasury to bring this project to a logical conclusion. There were a number of questions that were raised, but specifically to the construction branch, Honorable Tring raised questions around the inability to reach the targets, raised questions around the systems that are in place to make sure that budgets are spent, and raised the questions around the issue of the implementing agents. And I think we've already attempted to respond to these, but to really emphasize on this issue is that we have put together a convincing improvement plan, which is already on the implementation side, such that we're able to. We've also looked into integrate to highlight, then pick the top 50 projects. We're then zooming into these specific projects and visiting the regions and giving guidance where appropriate, so that projects are unblocked and escalate issues ahead of time where necessary. The MOAs with the implementing agents can also be made available to the Honorable Committee. we have made significant improvements on these MOAs where they now have better clauses to manage them, more compact in terms of the day-to-day management of the implementing agents. We even have certain clauses of saying that if the implementing agent is not performing as well, and they're not showing steps to improve, we can then also terminate our agreement, perhaps at a project-specific level. Thank you, Acting DG, and thank you, Honorable DM.
Yeah, thanks once more. But to Honorable Chairperson, the Acting DG is back on the line now. I think he can round off.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. My apologies indeed, my network has been quite poor. I wish to then respond to some of the questions that remains unanswered at this stage. And I just wanted to touch on the issue of the matters also raised here. On the issue of the parliamentary board that Honorable Graham-Mare has raised, and what the delayed transfer has meant in this regard, and because they have not necessarily submitted their books for some time, a matter the AG has flagged. I'm sure members would recall that the report of the AG did flag out this matter. And the report also decried the fact that despite the books not having been completed, the department had continued with the transfer nevertheless. And the AG found this quite displeasing. And it would have therefore been wrong of us to continue and just do the transfer without necessarily addressing the issue of the outstanding books. Honorable Graham-Mare has raised what impact this would have on that. What we do know is that the contracts that are there remain operational, and that we have not necessarily impacted significantly in as far as the rollout of the services that the Parliamentary Villages Board are required to roll out. And also on the issue of what are we doing to provide support to this to ensure that the books are brought to fruition and that ultimately the transfer is done. Indeed, we have discussed with Parliament and we have looked at the possibility of a new AGM that will look at the remainder of the term of office of the current board. And in this regard, to ballot for a mandate, as well as the possibility of finalization of the books and that those finalized books be adopted by the AGM. Accordingly, we are providing support in as far as finalizing of the books and ensuring that the books are ready for audit purposes and that the 3 outstanding financial years are presented before the AG for audit and consideration, which should pave way for us once the books are up to date to commence with the transfers. We will continue to provide support in this regard in ensuring that the services that are supposed to be rendered to members, that those are not compromised in this regard. So I think that is the update I can give. And I will give a further update in the next meeting once we have had even follow-up meetings with the committee members responsible for this part. On the issue of HR vacancies that has been identified, in the last engagement, this matter was raised and we did respond to it succinctly. We have kept on with our plan around filling of vacancies. We are reviewing also the prioritization of vacancies in terms of this. And to account for the discrepancy that the parliamentary researcher would have arrived at 14% and what we provide for S11,
is that we have had to take some of the key positions that were funded and to utilize those funding to prioritize new positions that we think that are requisite at this stage and which we believe that would serve us well. The discrepancy would obviously be informed by the fact that the number of positions, for instance, what we do to cross-subsidize, if we do take several smaller positions to make up for one big one, it impacts on the numbers in terms of the number of vacancies that we were speaking about as a baseline. And if we defund those and therefore put them off the active structure and fund a new identified capacity that we need on a higher level, that obviously has an effect of a reduction in the vacancy rate in that way. So we could also provide a separate report to Parliament in this regard, just to indicate what we are doing. We are consulting with DPSA every step of the way. And some of the things are what the AG has been decrying. For instance, in the last 6 financial years, the AG has been raising the issue of supply chain capacity and particularly contract management and demand side management. We had not been doing anything in respect of this, and it had become repeat finding every year. We have since decided that we were going to deal with that matter, that we will provide the additional capacity that's required, because this area of supply chain is an area quite sensitive, and even if you are to mitigate corruption and other things, you've got to start in this area in this regard. And to that extent, we have created a second chief directorate within the branch supply chain management, and the DPSA has actually approved, the Minister of Public Service and Administration approved our reconfigured structure. That includes those new priorities that we have identified, including supply chain. And we have used some of the positions that are important to us, but not as prioritized as what we have seen now. We have defunded those, and we have funded the new priorities that we find because of the ceiling we have in terms of cost of employment budget that is there. So with that, one would really answer to that discrepancy in that way. And in that way, I'm also responding to what Honorable Van Schalkwyk has raised about this matter coming back now and again. Last time we did indicate the number of positions in the pipeline, and that have been considered for approval. We are advertising positions now almost every weekend. Just in the last 2 weeks, we have advertised 4 positions of DDGs, of a DG, of senior managers. We are also advertising in the vacancy circular of DPSA lower level positions, and we are on a hunt for all of this. So we are busy at the moment. We have like 200 odd positions in the pipeline, and that pipeline we continuously add to it as we appoint new people. I can indicate that just at the beginning of this month, starting November, we had 67 new people starting. So that tells you the story of the work we are doing in this regard, and we are trying to fast track this process. However, there's no substitute for appointing correct employees, and I think the delays now, we are putting focus to all the appointment processes. We are looking at all the requirements. Are they being met? Are they correct? And so on. And we are also considering the issues of ensuring that the employees we appoint at this stage are the correct ones. Because once you have them in the public service, it's quite difficult to dismiss people and to get rid of people who don't really add value. And even worse, if you have appointed wrong employees, you are stuck with them for a significant period of time. So we are investing a lot of energy and patience and diligently to go through and scour through all of the records by the various committees at different levels, and to consider that indeed the people who are appointing are the right people at the end of the day. In as far as the issue that was raised about the enterprise system, and whether we are indeed going to just throw away Akibas. We are stress testing Akibas at this stage. Our new CIO is hard at work consulting with branches to look at the functionality and user friendliness of the system and whether it is responding to their needs. All branches have been doing a lot of work in this regard in telling us what they need the system to do for them. And we have also mapped all of the challenges that the AG has actually identified in as far as the articulation of the various systems we have in stream, and to then determine whether Akibas is a system we should stick with or whether it can be enhanced, or if all fail, whether we should replace it. That decision has not yet been made. We are in a process of the review of this system, and we will make the decision quickly. We have accepted, and we have discussed with our internal audit committee that indeed we have to look at this and make a decision fast. I had directed that by 15 December this year, that decision should have been made. All branches should have done what they need to do. We should have stress tested the system against those needs, and we should have produced a final report on what then it would be, and which should allow us to commence discussions with CETA and other relevant agencies around what do we do from here going forward, so that we have a robust system that can live to the demands of what we are supposed to do as a business and what we are supposed to do in going forward as an institution to deliver adequate services. On the issue of the delays in the transfers to non-state sector bodies in EPWP, one just needs to highlight the fact again, to go back to the report of the AG. The AG decried this matter and raised the issues of non-compliance, and raised the matter that once there is non-compliance in this regard, it will really be remiss of us to simply continue as we have done previously and simply transfer. We would not be in a position to then choose compliant. We readily do the transfers. And as the members know, as acting DG, I'm adjoined by Section 38, the provisions thereof which adjoins me to satisfy myself that anybody we are transferring money to, that body is in a position to actually utilize that money for the intended purpose, that it has capacity and systems to account for this money, and to make sure that the resources that we give them are deployed adequately, and that they are not abused, and that they can be fully accounted for. Failure to do so means that I have to take overall responsibility for this. And in EPWP, in previous years, you would know that this is what the AG has raised sharply with us, a matter that bordered on qualification on our part, primarily because of this same matter in the books of DPWI directly. And since we have adopted this process, we have not necessarily, I can assure Honorable Hicklin that we have not thrown our hands in the air and said that we will leave these bodies to their own vagaries. And I can assure Honorable Van Schalkwyk that we have not given up in this regard. What we have done is that to the many sector bodies that are non-state sector, they are supposed to build their own systems. And there has been a sort of a Chinese wall type of setup in provision of support. But I can assure you that this time around, we have had to dispatch our own people from EPWP, both in regions and on some occasions from national, to go to these bodies and help them and coach them, and to also train them in terms of the accountability standards that are expected of them. So we are providing the support to make sure that they ultimately are able to give us everything that we require for us to be able to do the transfers to them. Has this had an impact on their ability to roll out programs? Yes, indeed, it has slowed down our process, but it is a necessary evil, because if the AG reported to yourselves as a committee that does oversight, that despite us knowing that these people have no capacity to actually meet the requirements, we have nevertheless just given the money. That would be an unforgivable sin on our part, and the committee will not take it lying low if that was to actually arise. So we think that we are being prudent in our approach, despite the maladies of that prudency that come along with it. But we are committed to helping these bodies to ensure that indeed, ultimately, they access these resources and they are able to see to it that implementation can happen. We had been asked which provinces actually are impacted by this. I think I will ask my colleagues to provide the requisite list of the agencies. We have commenced to the review of the implementing agencies. We have also agreed that we had issued even a moratorium pending the review exercise.
It looks like acting DG has been kicked out of the system.
The acting DG yeah. I think DG, you must come in. The reality is that, I wanted to say Chair, the reality is that we have serious challenges of network today. So I wanted you to come in.
Yes, Chair. I was just doing so because he has covered quite a number of the issues raised by the honorable members. But I will touch on a few. The first one being the first question from Honorable Suisa around the handing overs versus the signing of leases. To say what you hand over, but you on the other hand talk about signing of leases with the GPV sites. We need to remember on members that we had reported when we started working on this, that we had a meeting with counterparts in the provinces, that is the provincial departments of public work, of social development, because the GBV sites, we will give out the shell, but what happens inside the shell will be the responsibility of social development. And therefore we need to have an agreement. As we identify the sites, we do that exercise together. So that where we agree, we renovate it as it must be ready to receive it and utilize it. So you will have this handing over. It's inevitable because we must give it over to them. And they must sign a lease, but that lease is more of an administrative function, truly speaking, because it's a government department leasing from another government department. But they don't necessarily, we still remain with the ownership of the facility. And therefore the rates and taxes are paid by us, but the services would be paid by social development. And this is where the lease comes in. We must have an agreement that says who pays for what as they utilize that facility. I thought I needed to clarify that. But the second one is on Sarah Bartman
Yes, Honorable Graham Murray, you would know as an Eastern Caper, this is one of the projects that has been very close to my heart as well. And a lot of wrong has happened. We will not be here and speak as if there's nothing wrong that has happened. In how the project was managed, there were constant disagreements and fights between our department and the Department of Arts and Culture, which to some extent, those led to the collapse of the project at some point, because one would be arguing, we've paid more than we should, and we have no more money to pay now. And the other one would be saying, we can't proceed with the payment without you paying us or paying for the project. And those tiffs have led to the collapse of the project. But we have engaged with the ministry to ministry, together with our HODs, and we have also engaged the Treasury to try and assist, because what was budgeted for the project has been exhausted in terms of the initial budget, but the work is not fully done. And we are dealing with that, the consequence thereof on the side, but we are driving the project to be back on to completion. And I know that in a few weeks' time, there will be some progress registered there. With respect to my last point on project performance in general and monitoring thereof, we have, as the ministry, realizing that we are suffering this issue of projects that end up having exhausted funds, but not completed. We have met with the public sector implementing agents, your DBSA, Development Bank of South Africa, or Southern Africa, Kocha Development Corporation, CDC, and as well as, which one is the third one? But we've met with all those implementing agents with a view to understand where the actual problem is. And we have realized that with respect to those projects that would be managed by them, there's very little or very few hiccups that take place. Most of the projects that collapse are those that are handed over to private companies, whether big or small. And we have agreed this top 50. We said all those that cost us funds, huge amounts of allocations, the top 50 projects that would be not performing, we want a monthly report so that we are able to go physically on the ground to those projects as part of monitoring and as part of what understanding, because there will be this that says it was delayed at procurement, it was delayed at handing over, it was delayed at construction. All those, you find that if you do not analyze which types of projects get delayed at procurement and understand the reasons why, this is we're diving deeper in understanding and lifting the reasoning so that we deal with the cause rather than the symptom. So we have agreed with the minister that we will share between ourselves those top 50 and conduct what we do call unannounced visits. They will simply see us in the on site with the record to say, why is it happening this way? To deal with those, because those are the real issues that contribute to us suffering some deficits in terms of performance and how the public view it. Thank you, Chair. I think those areas I wanted to reflect on, I have. With the blacklisting, I think it's an ongoing process, but it doesn't help if a company, you say you blacklist it and the reasons for its poor performance are in-house, are internal. We must be sure before we blacklist a company that we have, as a department, not contributed to its failure, because the success of the project it depends on both the project manager and us as the project sponsor, ensuring that we stick to the rules of the game. Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, I think I've covered the areas that I would have wanted to clarify. And let me take the opportunity probably now to thank the honorable members also for raising the issues, because on some, they really help us. Thank you.
I see the chairperson is not on the platform. Thank you very much, DM, for the response. Do we have follow-up questions, honorable members? I see Honorable Suwisa's hand. Or is that a legacy hand, Honorable Suwisa?
No, it's a new hand. It's a new hand, honorable member.
Can you take the platform, please?
Okay, thank you, Honorable Van Schalkwyk. I'm in shock, Deputy Minister. Maybe I'm the one who doesn't know English, or I'm lost somewhere. I even went to Google to try to find out what the word "leasing" means. I had to go to such an extent. Acting chairperson of the session, the department needs to take us serious. They can't come in here every week coming with a new story. Last week they told us something else. Today they're telling us something else. And I don't know. That's why I'm saying I have a problem with meetings that happen for the sake of meetings to happen. And we sit there and we must be given reports. This is not the committee that said last week is the same committee that said 2 weeks ago, is the same committee that's sitting today, is the same members that are sitting today. And we need to be taken serious when we get the responses from the department. My concern, acting chairperson, is that everybody's saying everything. We are speaking about ISA, DPSA, the implementing agents, what is their role in these projects, but there's nothing about IDT. The only body that this committee has a right to do oversight on is not mentioned anywhere. And this is going to show the committee as if the committee is incompetent, and we are not incompetent. We are very competent. to be where we are. I think the people that elected each and every individual in this committee to be a member of parliament, they had confidence that we are very competent, we'll be able to do the work. But how do we do our work of oversight if bodies that we don't have right over to do oversight are the ones that are being mentioned every single day when we come to those committee meetings? And it's very worrying. IDT is not mentioned anywhere. And I said it when we went on the oversight for Telkom. I said, we are speaking about an intervention plan. And even then, IDT, nothing was said about IDT. Even now, nothing has been said. It's ISA this, ISA that, somewhere in between. When Batu was speaking, I'm not sure if it's Batu or any other person, DBSA was also mentioned somewhere. Nowhere is IDT mentioned. And this is one of the bodies or the entities that we've been fighting for so long for them to be able to play their role within the department itself, to be able to execute their duties as an implementing agency. Deputy Minister, listen, according to what I've, because if you speak about listening to any normal person out there, you speak about renting out, you speak about hiring, any normal, even if you can call a grade 10 learner and you ask them about listening, that's where my problem is. The moment you say that you are listening and money is involved, that's where my problem is. Why is there listening? If it was not listening and we are saying we've got a contract between the social development to say that you need to maintain your own buildings, this is the contract, I don't have a problem. But the moment you speak about listening, then we talk about funding, we talk about the expenditure, and we talk about you are hiring a building from somebody else. That is why I'm saying maybe I don't know English, maybe I'm a bit lost, but I'm still shocked with the response that you are giving me when it comes to my issue about handing over, and then today we are told about leasing. We've listed a building to give to social development. And then you speak about maintenance and things that they need to do. And I'm telling you now, leasing, according to my understanding, involves funding. Why are the reasons that funding is going to be involved? If it's a contract of maintenance to say, social development, this is what you are supposed to do, this is your responsibility, I don't have a problem. My problem comes when the word leasing is being used. Thank you, Acting Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Subisa. I see the chair is on the platform. Not sure if she's able to engage now. In the absence, it's from my side.
I'm back, Honorable Van Schalkwyk. If you can just finish off with the issue of the questions, I will come in at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Do we have any other input or clarity seeking question from the other members? It's really a challenging day-to-day, Chairperson, in terms of connectivity for all of us. I don't see any other further hands from my side also. It's a point of concern when I've heard that the DM explained that majority of the private sector contracts is collapsing, but in terms of my concern, Chair, we are continuously saying that we need to move towards a greater private sector involvement. And is that then not a point of concern to be taken into consideration if we currently have that challenge? That's one input I want to bring to the fore. If I don't see any further hands, you may take over, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Van Schalkwyk. I don't know whether acting DG or DM are going to respond to Honorable Siwisa's question. And the one that has been raised by Honorable Van Schalkwyk, so that I may come in. Mine is the summary, which doesn't need a response but a commitment from the department.
Acting DG, are you safe now?
Yes, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. My apologies, I've had to even come and speak on the side of my colleague, Ms. Makubele, because my network was really failing. I need to respond to the issue raised in this regard as directed by the chair. One of the key things I needed to highlight is that, indeed, the IDT we are putting in stream, and we have done work to review the work of the implementing agents. We have Minister had directed that we do this review work. As a consequence of that, I had issued a moratorium on allocation of new projects to the implementing agent via CPM until the review exercise has been concluded. We have since reviewed the number of projects in the project pipeline. We had sought mandates from client departments to give us procurement instructions, and that those projects that we were given without a procurement instruction, we have put them on what I may term a B list, which is a project in waiting, and that the active projects for which we have a procurement instruction, we have now put them on a project pipeline. And on those projects, we then subjected the implementing agents to see what ratio we have of them. And we came to the realization that under those circumstances and with the review exercise, they were having an impressive ratio of 1-to-1, meaning one project to each and every project manager they have, and which was a very good thing because it encouraged us to then allocate even some of the significantly delayed projects to them so that they could be able to drive this work. With DBSA, we found a project ratio of one manager looking after about 4 or 5 projects. And we also raised a concern with respect of that project ratio. And we have been in DBSA around the allocation of this project to the same people when there was slow progress. I think this is a matter earlier the honorable members decried of what do we do when we see non-performance. The review exercise has happened. We had also, on the basis of the review, approached the Treasury to indicate to them what we have. In the last engagement, we had indicated to the committee that in this regard, we have solicited the enrollment of IDT into the sphere of project management and being an implementing agent. And the National Treasury has approved the inclusion of the IDT. We had last week concluded with the IDT the service level agreement, and we have this week commenced with the identification of projects as well as project allocation processes to get these projects to the IDT to commence. We have also done a run and a review of the IDT on our programs, and we found them with a good ratio of 1:2, and we were happy with that. We have built into the allocation letter that we are working with them on the additional requirements that they have requested, a requirement that they build additional capacity in lieu and in expectation of more allocation of projects to come their way. So to that extent, we wish to indicate to the members of the committee that we aren't only hearing you, but we are also listening to what you say. And this is the demonstration of our responsiveness to a matter that was put before us, that we attend to this matter. And I can assure the members of the committee that indeed the IDT features significantly in this regard. I must also ask them to indicate that even in the other matters that the members have raised and which I could not respond to because I got cut off, I do not wish to take the committee backwards, but I think the point that one can also raise in this regard was in respect of the issue of the parliamentary vote. I don't know whether by the time I got cut off, I had already responded to that, but I believe I had done so. And I would leave the other issues, I think, in response and the perception that has been created that we do not necessarily respond to the issues of the committee, and that secondly, that we are in essence having a talk shop with the committee. And lastly, the viewpoint that has been raised by members that states that we are actually giving conflicting responses and that we are not consistent in our response. I wish to highlight that we take the work of the committee very seriously. We also, on our part, take the issues pertaining to the responses we proffer to the committee. We verify the information we have to give to the committee in advance, and we take it from there. In as far as this is concerned, it will be we will be highly appreciative and grateful if the committee was to point out specifically to the inconsistencies of what we say in this regard, so we can clarify and provide adequate and appropriate responses to what is being said. But we wish to confirm that we are as much committed as the committee is to making sure that we are held accountable and that we are able to demonstrate to the committee with a portfolio of evidence all the answers that we proffer before you and that we provide before you. And lastly, there was the issue around the telecom towers north that it perceived we are avoiding to answer to. However, we can give a report that ever since the committee visited the last time, we had moved significantly with SAPS. We had exchanged the necessary documentation. We had asked that they provide to us. They had requested to do certain fixes themselves, to which we have already provided them with the letter giving them the authority to proceed as such. And we have now gone in the last week to the panel of FM to do the necessary costings to provide a TFM contract. And we are at the approval stage. We believe that before long, we would have already provided a contractor to be able to support SAPS with a total facility management contract in this regard. And while it has taken significantly longer to arrive where we are, but we have made tremendous progress, and we are happy with the intervention that the committee has made and the challenges that the committee has pointed out to us. And we can confirm that we are now gelling very well with SAPS in terms of our responsiveness to what needs to be done for Telkom now. Thank you.
Thanks, Acting DG. But there's this one issue on the GPV sites, whether it's leasing versus handing over. I had thought I was simplifying it. Now it looks like I'm complicating it. Maybe somebody who can explain better than me must please help. Because we are serious about not wanting to be seen as people who undermine this exercise. We truly are serious about it. But truly some of us, English is not our first language, so we may say something in the manner we understand it and technically it may be something else. So if somebody can assist with the question on the GPV side.
Jim, can I try to explain perhaps? It's nearly.
Okay, proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and honorable members and DM. I think there was also a question, I think it was Honorable Suisa and Honorable Tring, where they asked about how long these leases or these documents were sitting in DID. I think our biggest issue was that the matter changed form along the way. So at first we thought we were going to enter into agreements with the users for them to use the properties. But then later our minister then made a pronouncement that these processes are going to be donated to the user department, which then changes everything. So the current engagement that we're having with the client is to have user agreements with them so that they can use the properties in the meantime, while the process of donation takes place, which is a longer process. But in the meantime, for them to be able to utilize the properties, for them to be able to pay their rates and taxes and maintain the buildings, just for governance purposes, we're going to enter into user agreements with them, DM. I think that was the gap that I could pick up. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Chair. I think from our side, the follow-ups have also been clarified. But truly, the intention, I think I need to say this. The intention is to ensure that when we renovate, because remember, we identify unutilized buildings, which may not necessarily be readily fit for purpose. And therefore, there's work that we do. So before we do that work, there must be agreement that social development will be in a position to utilize the facility. That's really the basis. But secondly, it is to ensure that once the building been refurbished, is ready for occupation, the systems allow for social development to do so. As now clarified better by Ms. Makubele, this issue of the signing of the agreement between the two, it is to ensure that social development is able to utilize the facility immediately, because the other method of transferring takes longer. Maybe leasing is an incorrect word, but the intention, it's not to say we want them to pay money to us, but we would want them to utilize the facility, but to be able to deal with the municipal water and services. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, TM. Thank you, honorable members, for your constructive engagement on the reports. But the reality is that we had challenges, starting from myself, acting DG, Bato, and other members from the department. And as such, we didn't hear clearly some of the responses that were provided on the questions and comments that were raised by honorable members. And as such, we request that by Tuesday, the 15th, we get written responses on some of these issues. I will mention them. One, especially these responses, I think they're supposed to come from the DDG of Construction Project Management. One, standardizing social facilitation to prevent social facilitators being taken advantage of by criminal elements. I hope that acting DDG is writing. If not, I will send this to him. Number 2, cost to provide security in CAT in various in various, sorry. Okay. Cost to provide security in CAT in various projects, the number of project managers per construction project, cost for project preparation, ISA versus ITT. I'm in a car. I have to close windows now. There are all sorts that are going around. Okay. Costs for project preparation, ISA and IDT. Progress on recovering over and underspending on projects. I think Honorable Kramare raised this. That is the Sarah Batman issue. There is also another issue, the issue of Archibas. I think we need a detailed report on that one. Like how many millions of rands have you spent when you are still saying today it's still under evaluation. And another issue, I think you must understand what Honorable Siwisa has tried to raise and what is raised acting DG. The reality is that you informed us that we have no responsibility and right to question some of the projects that are done by ISA, because you have that part of the private part, and you also have the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Committee. So we don't play oversight, but with IDT, we play oversight. That's why when this IDT is repositioning itself and changing and being sustainable, we are saying as this portfolio committee, you must utilize it so that it's an entity that we have the right to question. Why are you not performing? Why is underperforming? We appreciate what has been done, but you must understand, for us to play our oversight role, as much as we applaud and comment what we have done positively, but we will always raise issue when there is something that we feel it is not done properly. But we accept this first quarterly report as presented to us as the Portfolio Committee of Public Works and Infrastructure. And as such, we note it. Thank you so much, DM, Acting DG, and your team for such. Honorable members, do I need a mover so that no, we don't have to adopt this, we note it. Honorable members, we are supposed to deal with the second item, which are the minutes of the previous meeting. I want to propose on this meeting, due to the challenges that we are all experiencing today, that we defer the minutes to the next meeting. It's only one set of minutes, the one of last week.
I'll second that proposal, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kramare, on that. And on that note, honorable members, we are through with the business of today, and we appreciate the way the department has presented to us and the way it has responded to questions and comments that honorable members have asked. Always appreciate the way honorable members engage constructively with the reports that we are given, playing your oversight responsibility, honorable members, in a way that the people of South Africa that voted for you to be their public representative will always be happy the way that you are playing your oversight role. Thank you again, honorable members, DM and your team, our parliamentary team. The meeting is adjourned. Apologies to all the people of South Africa for challenges of network today.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair.